Welcome to the Boxing Source Podcast, where we go over the latest news in boxing and react to all of the fights that happened in the past week. Now, let's go to our host, J.R. Bell.
Yo, what's up? What's going on? What's good, everybody? Hopefully, you're able to check in here for the September 7th edition of the Boxing Source Podcast. That's right, we are here live, whether it's on YouTube or Rumble. We got a number of things here that we're going to be talking about for this particular podcast as we are days away from the undisputed super middleweight championship fight between Santos Saul Alvarez Barragan and Terrence Allen Crawford. That's right. Canelo Alvarez versus Terrence Crawford for the undisputed super middleweight championships. The scene that's going to be happening or going down over there at the Legion Stadium in Las Vegas is going to be something. You know what I mean? We're definitely looking forward to it here at the Boxing Source. I will be in Las Vegas for fight week. We got a number of things that's going to be going on during that week, including a series of fights. I think there's some fights that are scheduled for Wednesday, and then also Thursday as well. But we're going to be talking about a fight card that's coming up on Saturday and a fight card that's coming up on Thursday here on this particular podcast, and just give a quick preview as far as like fight week is concerned. And then just a little bit as far as like, what, to look for in the fight between Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Crawford. Now for Wednesday, there's, a schedule of events for Wednesday. I think you have the open workouts scheduled for Wednesday over in Las Vegas. So I'll be, there in the building of sorts there for that fight week. So as far as like going live during the open workouts, we'll see how we are able to do that because, going to the Fontainebleau, it says it's supposed to be at the Fontainebleau or something like that. And I've never been at that, hotel or thing like that, while, it's just been built, right? So I have to see what the logistics is for it, first. And then once I see that, soon after I arrive and whatnot, then I'll see how I'll be able to work it as far as like going live during the open workouts if I'm there in time, because once I fly in, get settled in, and all that type of stuff, then I'll see how I'll be able to pull it off. You know what I mean? So definitely looking forward to that and everything going on. So let's see here. I want to see if I could get a few guests that's going to be going on the show here in a bit. So I'm going to see here if I could get that link out to them here real quick to talk about the fights, that's coming up. And then also, given the guests that'll be on here, we're going to talk about what happened over this past weekend. So let's see here if I could get that sorted out here real quick. So I'm going to see if I could send out the links out here for a few things and all of that type of stuff. So this is the thing about it, man. So let's see what's going on here with that. Let's get going, man. Let's get going here. All right. So with that being said, right, let's go into it. Undisputed Super Middleweight Championship of the World there in Las Vegas, Allegiant Stadium. Of course, Canelo Alvarez there with a record of 63 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws, going up against Terrence Crawford there with a record of 41-0. All right. And the thing about it is that, of course, this is not just for the Undisputed Super Middleweight Championships of the World, but this could be for the title of sorts of number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the sport. All right. So, with that being said, I would kind of like say, hey, look, given the tail of the tape, as they say, you got Canelo out there, as I mentioned there, at 63-2-2. I'm going to see here if I could share this here on the live screen real quick. You know what I'm saying? So we're going to get this thing here, shout out to the rec, Box Rec. So, yeah, there we go. All right, bet. There it is. 63-2-2 with 39 wins by way of knockout. There, of course, 35 years old. And as you see, as I've been mentioning there, Santos Saul Alvarez Barragan, right? at 35 with a height of 5'7.5" and a reach of 70.5", right? Her debut was almost 20 years ago in October 29th, 2025. Wow. So he's out there, of course, having a number of fights over in Mexico there at the age of 15 years old. 15 years old, right? Now, you go through the past few fights that he's had there, going up against, like, say, for example, we're going to go back because we're going to go to the point where he became the undisputed super middleweight champion there. In 2021 against Caleb Plant, he was able to score a TKO victory. Then after that, he tried to go up in weight yet again, this time against Dmitry Bivol. Of course, in the past, he had fought Sergey Kovalev for a version of the light heavyweight championship and was able to win that fight by knockout. Here against Dmitry Bivol, he was outpointed, overmatched, outgunned. There was frustrated over the course of that particular fight. And even with all of that, and it was a unanimous decision victory in favor of Dmitry Bivol. The scores read 7-5 in favor of Dmitry Bivol all across the board. 7-5. If y'all saw that fight live, or you can see them fights in the replays or whatever it is, there's ain't no way that it was 7-5. You know what I mean? Ain't no way it was 7-5 there in favor of Dmitry Bivol. You might as well say it was like 9-3, okay? But, moving forward after that, you had Gennady Golovkin fight for the undisputed super middleweight championships. He shouldn't have fought Gennady Golovkin 3 times. Like, after the second fight, this should have been it. This is the time where, you see that Gennady Golovkin going up to super middleweight after all of those years. He was at middleweight just to face Canelo Alvarez. And I thought at that time, leading into that fight, I thought that Canelo Alvarez was going to send Gennady Golovkin straight to hell. Okay? But he didn't even do that. He just outpointed him for like 12 rounds and got a unanimous decision win. Okay? Then he had his fight against John Ryder. Knocked him down pretty much in the 5th round. And then after that, I just thought it was going to be all but over. But nope, he kind of went through the rest of those rounds, 6, 7, 8, etc., and got through that. Now, you have one thing there where you got John Ryder, and then you see kind of like a pattern here. John Ryder, then Jamel Charlo in September of 2023 was able to get a unanimous decision victory, knocked him down in round 7. Then the next one, you have Jaime Munguia, another unanimous decision victory, knocked down Munguia in round 4. Then you got Edgar Berlanga, unanimous decision victory, knocked him down in round 3. So since his bout against John Ryder, he scored at least one knockdown in his fights, but hasn't been able to, secure, a whole thing as far as like the, the TKO victory or a knockout victory, like he had against Caleb Plant to become the undisputed super middleweight championship. So he's had times where he's defended these world titles, but hasn't been able to properly, finish off his opponents there in a sense. You know what I mean? And you'll either, like I said, either get a TKO or a KO victory against those guys, right? Now, I've said this in a earlier show here. Shout out to Ignorant Man Sports Media. I said that for multitude of those cases, after these fighters have been able to, experience the power or the precision or the timing there of Canelo Alvarez, and they were knocked down, that they didn't necessarily take as many risks, be as aggressive as they were before, or try to get in there in order to land a couple of more shots against them. You know what I mean? So that's why you didn't necessarily see those type of knockouts, or see knockouts in general in those fights against those opponents. But then you had this fight here that was in May of this year against William Skull, undefeated. There had the IBF title because the IBF was IBF, and as I always say, that when you had Canelo facing Berlanga, that the IBF ended up stripping, Canelo Alvarez, right? But then Canelo fought William Skull there once again, and I mean not once again, but fought for the IBF Super Middleweight Championship to become undisputed again, and was able to win a unanimous decision in that fight. That was one of the probably one of the worst fights that we've seen in some time, given the lack of activity that was happening there in that fight, right? So, with that being said, there were a number of things that I kind of like gauged from that say that, maybe Canelo has, kind of like regressed a little bit. Not just with the fights that I was just mentioning there against Jamel Charlo, against Jaime Munguia, against Edgar Berlanga, but this fight here against William Skull kind of like said, hey, is he able to, properly cut off the ring? Is he able to, set up his opponent in order to, land some shots? Because a lot of times, even in this particular instance, as far as like I would say the Jaime Munguia fight, that was the last fight that I was at when it comes to Canelo Alvarez there, where he was able to kind of set up Munguia in a sense early in that fight. Round 2 and round 3, you see Jaime Munguia be very active when it came to his punch output, and it looked like he had a little bit of success in those particular rounds. But then in the 4th round, when he had Canelo to the ropes, Canelo had like a high guard, but he was like backing up a little bit to the ropes, and then Munguia kind of like approached forward and stepped forward, I guess, throwing either, like the jab or whatever it is. And then you seen, Canelo throw like a hook, uppercut, hook combo. And, the uppercut pretty much like landed to the point where Munguia went down. So that last hook didn't really land, but it still had Munguia down there in the 4th round. And after that, you really didn't see that much activity there from Jaime Munguia at that point, as far as like being as aggressive or taking as many chances as he was before, right? So he became a lot more conservative in that sense. Now with Berlanga got knocked down in the 3rd round, and given Berlanga, given his height and given his I guess his size or whatever it is, pause, he was able to try to see if he could what I'd say be more physical against Canelo Alvarez, but it wasn't to the point where he was, taking so many risks out there. You know what I mean? And then even in that particular fight, right? He had one of those moments where he had a free shot on Canelo Alvarez and didn't really capitalize off of that, So there you seen like after going through those next few rounds, 10, 11, and 12 or whatever, that you kind of seen Canelo be kind of coasting in a sense. You know what I mean? So, with that being said, right? And then this fight here against William Skull, you kind of see Canelo being more on the back half or back end of his career. He's nowhere close to being in his prime. Like I showed, he's been in the game since 2005, October of 2005. We're coming close to actual 20 full years that Canelo has been a professional fighter. 20 years, and that whole wear and tear, that gets to you. It's not just these fights that he's recently had, but those fights that he had at middleweight, the 2 other fights that he had there against Golovkin, the fights against Callum Smith or Daniel Jacobs or the Kovalevs that you see here, Rocky Fieldage, the little Chavez, as I say, Liam Smith, Miguel Cotto, James, like the list goes on and on. Of course, the Floyd Mayweathers, Erislandy Lars, those fights. And that was within what? From Floyd Mayweather in 2013 up until now, it's been 12 years. It's going to be almost 12 years to the day with that fight coming up against Terrence Crawford, that you've seen Canelo Alvarez there in some type of high caliber or high profile matchup or something like that. That's what you've seen here from Canelo Alvarez from 2013 up until now. And so, with that being said, right, now we got to see where Canelo is in this particular instance of his professional career going up against Terrence Allen Crawford. Yep, I said Terrence Allen Crawford, right? So we're gonna go with that quick tail of the tape here with Terrence Allen Crawford, as they say, right? And this should be it right here. 41-0, 31 wins by way of knockout. Okay, height at 5'8" with a reach of 74, right? Now he is there. He is a little bit taller listed, and the reach is longer there, listed at 74. Okay. He's had 41, as I say, 41 bouts. It says 245 total rounds in comparison to Canelo Alvarez, who had 520 rounds in his docket, right? Pro debut March 14th, 2008. So Canelo, even though Canelo, right, is supposed to be the younger fighter, he's had a much longer career. Of course, as I mentioned there, with him starting at 15 years old over in Mexico and having all those fights over in Mexico, right? Right. Now, that being said, right, given that you have Terrence Crawford and his level of activity that's been mentioned multiple times, right? You go back to, say, for example, there, Kell Brook, right? Look at this. Actually, I'll even go before that. So he's had two fights in 2019, but then had the one fight in 2020 against Kell Brook, the one fight against Sean Porter in November of 2021, the one fight against David Evangeline 2022, Errol Spence Jr. 2023, and Israel Madrimov in 2024. Okay. Now, a number of people have talked about that level of that inactivity that Terrence Crawford has had. But even with all of that, with the exception of his last fight there against Israel Madrimov, he's been able to finish those fights by knockout. Okay. Kell Brook, TKO. Sean Porter, TKO. Evasion, KO. Spence, KO, TKO. Israel Madrimov there, the only one where it's like unanimous decision where, we kind of like had to adjust to the movements or the sudden movements there of Israel Madrimov. So, that kind of like made it a little bit, of an issue there, so to speak. And I think a number of people have kind of like pointed to that particular fight as to Crawford's timing and him being able to try to properly adjust and everything like that. So we have to see how that goes. All right. Now, trying to see if I could be able to add a guest here that should be able to chop it up with us here. We should have the topic here joining us live. What's going on?
What up, bro? You can hear me?
Yes, sir.
What's going on, man?
Yeah, all good, man. Just getting ready for this fight week here coming up. Canelo versus Crawford, man. It's gonna be a good matchup here for the undisputed super middleweight championships, man. And just going through a quick tale of the tape here, before we get into the nitty gritty for fight week, man. So on a scale of 1 to 10, so to speak, how amped up are you for this particular fight happening at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas?
I mean, honestly, that part don't really make a difference to me because it's like it's a big fight. You know what I mean? So as long as those guys is like those are two fighters that are a show. You know what I mean? Whereas like it don't really matter about all the other stuff on the outside. I'm coming specifically to watch those two guys get it going. So
Okay.
it don't matter really where it was. And if you want to do like, the whole historical storyline, then you might do MGM or other spots, but
Hmm.
it's gonna do what it's gonna do because that's a big fight.
Word. Word.
So,
Now,
so
I feel you. Now, what about the overall magnitude as far as like the winner and what it could mean for the winner in like boxing history, so to speak?
well, I think this is a bigger fight for Terrence Crawford more so than it actually is for Canelo. You know what I mean? Because of course we know Canelo has done his thing at this weight. He's campaigned. This is his weight class. With him being the undisputed champion,
Mm-hmm.
knocking down all of the guys in the division, and you know what I mean. Him beating Bud, who's jumping up. he don't really gain as much from it. Like if he goes out there and dominates Bud and he walks through Bud,
Mm-hmm.
he might not gain as much. It'll be entertaining. Like it'll definitely be like something to talk about, but it won't be like yo, Canelo, it really is the man. Like he's not gonna be able to receive another like hoorah for beating Crawford. You know what I'm saying? But vice versa, if Crawford was to slay the dragon coming off of that performance with Earl Spence, you know, it would be tough to not put him up there with like those top great guys. You know what I mean? So, like I say, it's gonna be a great fight, definitely. You know what I mean? But
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if Canelo gains as much for beating, because you know automatically if he goes out there, right? Let's say he walks through Bud. Say the fight's not as competitive as what we think it is. It's gonna
Mm.
be like, oh man, well, it is Canelo, and you know, he is supposed to do that, and he is the bigger guy, and because Canelo's fought up at 175, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he really is the bigger guy, and then he's beat a lot of these guys at 68. Bud went up, fought Madrimov at 54. That's the only fight we've seen him at outside of, you know what I'm saying, like a higher division outside of 47. So it's
Yeah.
gonna be interesting. You know, it's gonna be a great fight though. I love to see it. It's gonna be a great fight for sure.
Yeah, now you know to your point as far as like Canelo being up there at light heavyweight, like he weighed in at like 174 in his two bouts in the light heavyweight division against Sergey Kovalev and against Dmitry Bivol, respectively. So, I mean, we've, as you said, we've seen him, you know, be much higher at a much higher weight than where Crawford has been at, you know, over the course of his professional career. This is like the very first bout that we see Terrence Crawford that's going to be weighing in over 150 or so pounds. So a lot of people don't necessarily know how he's going to, you know, maneuver around the ring, how he's going to be able to carry that extra weight or whatever weight that he's going to have going into this bout, and how he's going to perform, you know, round after round after round, because it's more about, you know, his level of, you know, endurance, so to speak, there, or his energy level once he's there a few rounds against Canelo Alvarez. Now, you know, a lot of the instances where he's had his fights in the past here, he's had some type of, you know, advantage as far as like either height or reach or something like that, or even size in a sense. You know what I mean? But here, he's not going to have any of that except for height and reach. Now, are those going to be enough of a factor for him to either outpoint Canelo or to, you know, be more aggressive in certain spots against Canelo Alvarez? You know, that's the thing that I'm.
Um, I, so this is my breakdown of it, bro. I think, and it, this is one of those things is like neither. I don't even think Bud really knows how exactly this fight is gonna go. I don't really think anybody really knows. You can anticipate it, but this fight can still be like, oh man, I didn't see that.
Hmm.
Um, Canelo lately has definitely been
Oh yeah, you was like cutting off and on. Are you back?
you, yeah, you can.
Yeah, I can hear you a little bit.
Hold on, let me try this. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now, yeah, now I can.
I'm clear.
Yeah.
Okay, so like I was saying, over the past few fights, like over, you know what I'm saying, a majority of his career, Canelo is a counter puncher early in the rounds. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? He more so wants to see the openings he can take on you later in rounds. You know what I'm saying? He's not really more worried about banking those early rounds to get ahead. He's more so looking at, okay, he do this. He's studying your tendencies in those first few rounds. You know what I'm saying? So he can start to do what he does. So if Bud can bank those early rounds.
Oh man. Oh, it looked like he kind of like had a big cut there. Hold on. You see if we're
I'm
back.
going in and out still, bro.
Yeah.
Did you hear anything I said?
Yeah, like you were talking about the banking of the early rounds there with Crawford, if he could take advantage of that, while Canelo tries to assess what Crawford is going to be doing.
Right. Okay. So is win 8 rounds.
Hmm.
You see what I'm saying? He don't got to win all 12.
Yeah, still, kind of
But if
like
he
that.
can still, I'm still. Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me see what I can do here, bro.
But yeah, I mean, I hear you kind of like saying, like, with Canelo, I don't think he wants to, win every single round. He don't necessarily have to win every single round. And you don't necessarily have to here when it's a 12-round fight, you know. But with that being said, you don't want to have it to the point where Crawford could get like a sizable lead, whether it's like within the first 3 rounds or within the first 6 rounds, because you don't know what Crawford will do for those like say the back half of the fight. You know what I mean? Let's see. Let's have this thing here. Oh, good question here live here from Jaime Alvarado, right? When it comes to this, what kind of criticism?
And I think
Hold on, you had something real quick? Topic?
I said, can you
Yeah, still cutting in and out. Still cutting in and out.
hear me?
Right. I can hear you, but still cutting in and out. Yeah, we'll see. How we'll be able to
And
work
hear me then.
topic on this joint here, right? But I'll get to this thing here from Javier Alvarado real quick. Asked, what kind of criticism would Canelo get if his last opponent was a year ago and only had 10 pro fights? Hey, in this particular juncture, in this era of social media, as I say, or instant news posting and all that type of stuff, you probably would get a lot of criticism. You know what I mean? Because it's not like the era beforehand, right? And I said in like one of the videos, like that's on the YouTube channel, whatever, that you have a number of instances where you have fighters that have like a stacked record, right? But we're still able to fight guys that didn't necessarily have that many fights on their record. Why? Just to be able to stay active there, in a sense, right? So, like, I'll see if I could, bring up my recent example here that I was gonna mention. So think there was like one point of Julio Cesar Chavez's career where he fought a guy that it wasn't that he was like 14-8, but he only had like a few fights in his record. Okay, I found it. All right, bet. So there is a fight on record in December of 1991 where Julio Cesar Chavez fought Ignacio Perdomo. Julio Cesar Chavez was 77-0. Ignacio Perdomo was 7-2. That's right. He only had 9 professional fights to his record, and he was able to face Julio Cesar Chavez, who was at the time 77-0. Okay. And as I mentioned, that was like back in 1991. But fast forward to now, or like to August 3rd, 2024, where Terrence Crawford, coming off of his win against Errol Spence Jr., fought Israel Madrimov for the WBA and the WBO interim super welterweight championship, where Madrimov only had it says 11 pro fights to his record, but given that it's Terrence Crawford and that, everything has to be big with Terrence Crawford, then you have him going up against Israel Madrimov in Los Angeles, and it's part of like a Ring magazine or Riyadh season type of event. So it made it so much bigger than it actually should have been. Topic. You see if you're back with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So, what were you saying? I didn't want to cut you off. You was rolling.
Oh, okay. No, I was, answering Jaime Alvarado's question in reference to if Canelo Alvarez, right, at some certain point of his career, like say in fight, let's say fight 54 of his pro career, say for example that at his 54th professional fight, right, that he fought someone that had only 10 pro fights to their record, right? Like how much criticism would Canelo get if he, one, if he only fought once a year, and that the last fight that he had was against a guy that only had 10 or 11 pro fights, like how Terrence Crawford fought Israel Madrimov, with that being the one fight he had last year, coming off of his win against Errol Spence Jr. You know, but it's different eras, different times. So you probably see a lot of criticism, but given the time period, yeah, you're gonna see that because everything is, on camera, or posted on social media or anything like that. So it's not like, as I was mentioning back in the days where you see guys that have a lot of fights on their record going up against a guy that could be like 7-2, as I mentioned, or maybe like 10-3, because
But
they're trying to get the experience or try to stay active. You know what I mean?
can I interject on that
Go
one?
ahead. Yeah, go ahead real quick.
It's like one, Canelo is superstar status. You feel what I'm saying? So the expectations for a guy of Canelo's resume, of course, we wouldn't want to see him do that at that point of his career. It's like I say, like LeBron James, like a Michael Jordan, like a Tom Brady. You know what I mean? It's like
Mm,
we know how great you are, where certain things don't wow us anymore,
mm,
opposed to like somebody that hasn't accomplished those things where it's like, oh, okay, like I say, we've seen Canelo go from 147 to 154 to 160 to 160. I mean, so
mm,
we've seen him do those things. We've seen him take on Floyd Mayweather's and Lara's
mm,
and all of these tough top guys where you can't go backwards. You know what I mean? When you've been to like the Super Bowl for 7 straight years, or when like for like LeBron, you've been to what, 8 straight, 9 straight finals.
right.
When you don't do that, it's like, oh, is he falling off? But if
Mm,
you win a Super Bowl once, you know what I mean, and then a couple years go in between, and then you go to another, you know what I mean, that's okay. So like I say, when Canelo is the guy, like the superstar
mm.
of the sport, it's a little bit tougher to compare that. You know what I mean? Like,
Had
and
those
like I say,
one-offs.
Bud moved up. Bud moved up in weight, so that
Yeah,
was the like a tune up for him at that weight.
at
I
that
don't want to
weight.
say tune up. I don't want to say tune up, but
But
it
some of
was
the
that was like
kids, as
a
they say, their feet wet, so to speak. Like how
right,
coming up here, next month with Jerome Busenis, going up against Luis Lima. Like not a lot of people know who Luis Lima is at all, but that is like the first fight that Boot said this is going to have at 154. You know, so
right,
you
right,
could
right,
say that
right,
would be the same instance here for Israel Madrimov. But I was like mentioning a whole thing with Julio Cesar Chavez in that one previous example, right? Like he even had more examples also. If I share this right here, right? So at the end of '89, he faces a guy there in Alberto Cortez that's 44-0. His next fight is against Mildred Taylor at 24-0-1. And then after that, he has fights against a guy in Aguado that's 5-3, and then Russell Mosley that's 4-3-1. So, I mean, we've had these instances happen before. It's just that, here today, like I said, everything is either on camera or you can see it on ESPN Plus or the Zone or something. So we're seeing guys that are like 2-0, 3-0, 5-0 already on camera. Where back even in like the 2000s, you never seen that. So with that, it would have been like if you've seen someone like a caliber of a Canelo Alvarez facing a guy like 10-0 or whatever it is now, then yeah, you're gonna see a lot of criticism. But back then, it was happening pretty often. You know what I mean? Shout out to Goat here in the live chat on YouTube says that Crawford is going to knock out Canelo in the 11th round. I got to check the odds on that though. Real, you know what I'm saying? Timothy Taylor in the building. He says if Canelo was fighting David Benavidez, Christian and Billy, David Morrell Jr., Dmitry Bivol, and Beterbiev, he wouldn't fight 3 times a year. Yeah, and we don't see guys like having those type of fights, but 2 times a year. Like Canelo has that schedule of 2 fights a year, basically. But 3 times a year, nope, not necessarily. Although it could happen if you have like those type of one-off fights, as I mentioned. But if you do have that, how is that going to be received by the fans? How are they going to take that if like a Canelo Alvarez faces a guy that's like 12-1-1 or something like that, or like 15-5? How are the fans going to be able to receive that if he had like a fight in Mexico against an opponent that's 15-5? How would the fans receive that? And I'm not sure if a number of fans would be able to properly process that and say, hey, okay, this is something that that Canelo is having, to stay busy, to stay active, and not be on the shelf for an extended period of time. I'm not sure if the fans will be able to kind of like receive it like that. It'll probably be something different. You know what I mean?
And then can I interject again too? Right, I was thinking this. I was at work thinking this the other day.
All right.
Canelo, one of my favorite fighters. You know what I'm saying? Still is, but it always gets to a point, right? Like when you go from it's the stages. You go from a prospect to a rising contender to a contender to a title eliminator to a champion. Then once you go from a champion, we try to get you to stardom. You know what I mean? And once you go from stardom, then it's superstardom. Once you reach that highest level, it's like, okay, you almost want to see a fighter beat or push to that edge. You know what I'm saying? That's where it gets to. You want to get to that point where you want to see, like, even with me with Canelo, it's like Canelo, and people could tell you, bro. After he fought Floyd, I was like, oh, nah, he's going to smoke the rest of these guys. And he was going and doing his thing. It's like, well, this person could beat him. It's like, all right, well, line him up. He beat him. Okay, well, this person is always like, you almost getting to that point. Once you reach a certain level in it, it's like nowhere to go but down. You know what I'm saying? And he's reached that level where it's like that's why people want to see him fight David Benavidez.
Because
because they know David Benavidez is a guy that could possibly beat him.
As you said, that's what you're looking for. You're looking for if there is a guy that could possibly beat Canelo Alvarez, and you talk about where the stages that Canelo has been through. Like in 2010 was like his first time where he won any version of a title, like regional title, but it was still like a title nonetheless. So from 2010 up until now, that's like 15 years. He's been involved in some type of either title bout or like a world, level type of instance. So we've seen him pretty much around a high level for at least a decade, like from 2015 up until now. And then, as I mentioned there, from 2010, being able to win like an NABF welterweight championship in 2010, he's kind of like had that type of spotlight. So now it's like here in the super middleweight division, like who are those guys that he could face that could really be that challenge? And as Timothy Taylor was mentioning, like you have someone like a David Benavidez or Christian and Billy who's going to be in this fight card coming up September 13th. That those would be the guys that kind of would give fans the idea like, hey, this could be a challenge here for Canelo Alvarez. You know what I mean? He adds in here like John Ryder, Jaime Munguia, and Edgar Berlanga had no business on a pay-per-view main event. He says that Canelo has been cherry picking since after the second Golovkin fight. Damn. Oh
I
man.
mean, but you gotta think too though, bro. Look, Canelo is like halfway out. You know what I'm saying? He's on the backside. This is a young man's sport. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He has put in all of that work of like facing the toughest top guys from 147 to 160. And then, you know what I'm saying? Like, you gotta really look and admire and be like, okay, I see why. Like, he's not trying to be in no B-side type of fight at this point.
Word.
You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Whereas like David Benavidez is like a that's like basically if I'm gonna fight David Benavidez, I would rather go up to 175 and fight Dimitri Bivol, who got belts. You know what I'm saying? That's the equivalent then. If I'm gonna fight Benavidez for the same risk, I'm gonna move upward and fight Dimitri Bivol for belts. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
That's a tough mountain. That's a tough hill to get up at this point. Now, if I was 19, 20, I could run up this hill with this stuff on my back. But now, I gotta walk up this hill right here. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? This I
yeah, I
can't
feel you.
I can't get up that hill the same now.
Yeah,
That's
definitely not.
and Benavidez is young. He's prime. He's not really a 68. He squeezes down a 68, but
Mm.
Benavidez probably is comfortable 175, where he would be comfortable. You know what I'm saying? That's where he probably would really be. So Canelo knows like this guy 6'4". He gonna come in the ring 180, prime, fast. Do I really feel like dealing with this at this point in my career? You know what I'm saying? Like Canelo's on his farewell tour. So that's why you do get a John Ryder and a Munguia and you know what I mean, a Berlanga, who are decent. Like I don't want to say they like world champions, but
Mhm.
they're solid guys for Canelo to still. I don't want to disrespect those guys and be like those are chess. I mean those are like keep
Mhm.
me sharp fights for them. You know what I'm saying?
Uh,
Let me let this young guy come in here like a sparring almost. You know what I'm saying? Let this young guy come in and give me some work, so that way if I do gotta, if I do get that call where something makes sense, I can give. I'm still sharp. I'm still ready. I'm still, you know what I mean? I'm still Canelo. But it's really honestly, bro, what fight for a guy of that magnitude makes sense for Canelo that he can benefit from? Not just him
at
like I say,
168.
setting himself up to lose. Yeah, something not just for him to set himself up to lose, but where he can gain. Like, okay, I can reach another level with this guy, not him elevating a guy. Because if I'm gonna do that, I'm gonna just take the joints I've been doing.
Mm. All right. No, real quick here, Timothy Taylor posts up. He says Canelo never faced the toughest fighters at 154 pounds except for Lara, and most people feel Lara was robbed. Now, the thing with that is Canelo had fought Shane Mosley, Josecito Lopez, Austin Trout, Floyd Mayweather, Alfredo Angulo, and Erislandy Lara, and James Kirkland before going up to face Miguel Cotto at, as they say, Canelo weight of sorts. There at 155. So the Floyd Mayweather fight and I say the Austin Trout fight also, because the thing with Austin Trout was that was one fight where I think he had to do a number of adjustments. And to me, live, if it wasn't for the knockdown that Canelo scored, it should have been a whole lot closer than those cards indicated. You know what I mean? So I think Canelo had to, deal with a few issues there, so to speak, at 154 pounds. But after that, yeah, he kind of, had a little bit of kind of coasted a little bit up to a certain point there at 154, not necessarily 154, but like 160 up until his fights against Gennady Golovkin. Because like if you think about that, right, he fought Amir Khan at middleweight. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. was like even a little bit above 160 pounds, and then he had his fights against Golovkin. So actually, he didn't really have much of a career at 160 pounds like that. Just those two fights with Golovkin, and that's pretty much it. He didn't face what was it, Demetrius Andrade at 160. He didn't face Jamal Charlo at 160. So I know that you have the critique of Canelo at 154, but actually 160 is the weight class where Canelo didn't really have that much there on his resume on that front. Now, on the flip side with Terrence Crawford, as we say, he's there. First fighting that super middleweight division. Only had the one fight at 154 against Israel Madrimov. So, and his level of or his inactivity, they're just having that fight that was last August against Israel Madrimov. So, people are like saying, okay, where is he at this point? Being at I guess around 168 or the 168 limit for this upcoming fight one, and then facing the top fighter at 168 pounds, how is he going to be able to do? Now, I've heard from people that's been around the camp when he's been preparing for Canelo Alvarez, they say that he's working at a completely different level that he's done in his previous fights, whether it's in the welterweight division against like a Sean Porter against the Errol Spence or Vanger or whatever, or below that, at 140. So, but I think it's more about the magnitude of this particular fight, and that he, as he mentioned before his fight against Errol Spence, that he wants this to be the Terrence Crawford era. And he knows that with the win over Canelo Alvarez, it would stamp it as the Terrence Crawford era, whether it's like from 2015 up until now, or I don't know, maybe 2010, but that's something there that will be up for debate. I know that there was like a heated debate of sorts when it came to what is a bigger win if it happens, Mayweather over Canelo or Crawford over Canelo. So we'll have to see how that goes on that much. Shout out Timothy Taylor with this question. Which trainer is more likely to throw in the towel if it comes to that? Eddie Reynoso or Bomac? Ooh, that's a great question. That's a great question, given that both of these trainers have been with their respective fighters since the beginning. Eddie Reynoso basically been with Canelo since he was 15 years old. Bomac's been with Terrence Crawford since his, start of his career. And their relationships, I would say, are pretty much equal when it comes to like how much they've been working with each other. Given the competitive nature of Terrence Crawford, I think he would not want Bomac to throw in the towel. Okay, I think the same thing would be with Canelo Alvarez. But you asked the question, and I'm going to answer the question. And my answer is going to be Eddie Reynoso. I think it's going to be Eddie Reynoso.
You think so?
Yeah, I think so. But it's going to be twofold, right? Because I think, as far as like results go, right? You have the whole scenarios. You have decision. You have KO. You have TKO, right? For me, I think Canelo is more likely to score a KO victory over Terrence Crawford. But with Terrence Crawford, he's more likely to have a TKO victory over Canelo Alvarez. So what that means is that you could have it to the point where Canelo could get knocked down multiple times, or it could be to the point where he's just being hurt, outpointed, and given that he could have, a crazy grin at chin, as they say, never being knocked down. You can still have that instance here where he's never knocked down, but you can see him still being tagged up and being outpointed, and you can see like a lot of punches being landed that can have some emphasis on Canelo Alvarez, to the point where Eddie Reynoso could, have that in his mind that, oh man, this ain't looking good for my fighter. This is a fighter that I've been with for like 20 years plus or whatever. and I just don't want to see him continue to get punishment like that. So it kind of like would be like I said. Well, I mean, he ain't necessarily throwing the towel there. You know what I'm saying? But with the fight between Crawford and Spence, you know, so even with that, I could see it where Eddie Reynoso could throw in the towel. More likely to see Eddie Reynoso throwing in the towel than Brian Bomac McIntyre there on that front. You got something for that topic?
Um, that's never even really crossed my mind because I think, like, you know what I'm saying, Canelo has been in that fire, so I don't see him unless Crawford really come in cracking.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see him pushing Canelo back like that. And what he gonna have to, if that's the case, the only way he would have to be like 4 punches, combinations, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You know what I'm saying? Something like
Mm-hmm.
that. But just landing one clean shot. If you done fought Triple G 3 times, you could take a punch. You know what I'm saying? If
Mm-hmm.
you done fought Triple G 3 times, you could take a little bit of a little punch, So I don't see Canelo personally. Um, like I say, I don't know if Bud is gonna stand in there like toe to toe type of thing.
Right.
That wouldn't be smart. I would advise against that personally. I
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't want him to stand in there and because Canelo like a little mountain with arms. You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't advise for him to stand in there and just go toe to toe and let Canelo
Right.
have the
'Cause,
opportunity to exchange.
right. Because that's the thing with
So
Canelo. Like he has
uh
that instance. The thing with Canelo for me is that he doesn't necessarily have like a quick twitch mobility, as they say. Like he'll be at a flat-footed stance or whatever it is, right? But the thing about it is that with him being at that type of stance, he's able to get the most out of his punches. That's why you see like a lot of torque when he throws like those hooks, hooks to the body and everything like that. So, or uppercuts, right? So that is the thing that Terrence Crawford would have to, be aware of or watch out for while, Canelo is within range. So that's why I say with Crawford, him approaching this particular fight, and he could be at a southpaw stance. If he has like a good enough reach advantage there at 74 in comparison to what 72 or a 70 and a half actually there with Canelo Alvarez, then if he's able to properly utilize that reach advantage, then he could get away with a little bit more or try to get away with a little bit more if he sees what Canelo does here early in the fight. But still with Canelo, he'll do whatever it takes in order to set traps, use feints, whether it's with the arms or the feet, and see if he'll make Terrence Crawford make a mistake. Shout out Timothy Taylor there real quick. He says Canelo has a rematch clause, so there's no need for Eddie Reynoso to allow Canelo to take serious damage there. So hey, I mean, see, that's why I say maybe it's gonna be Eddie Reynoso that would be more likely. Let's see. Oh, another question here. Will the betting odds change on fight night and for who? Ooh. Man, I just like talked about this the other day. I usually go to proboxingodds.com, cheap plug, there when it comes to the betting lines all across the board. And I was mentioning that Terrence Crawford is at a plus, like say 128 on Unibet. Never really heard of that. But everyone else kind of like has him at like plus 150, around that plus 150 range. That to me like says you can't even get him at plus 200 right now. Like everything is under 200, whether it's the favorite or the underdog. Everything is under 200. You would think with Canelo Alvarez being the undisputed super middleweight champion, with him having the amount of fights that he's had over his professional career, that he would have a more significant, or the odds would be in his favor more significantly, but it's not. So here going into this upcoming fight week, at this point, I'd have to. I don't know if it's going to really shift that much. Now, if I had like my phone on me or something like that, well, my phone ain't next to me or whatever it is, but usually I go to DraftKings to kind of like gauge the amount of people that have like, how many have picked, Canelo and how many have picked Crawford. But I haven't really like got that here, right now, so to speak.
That joint was kind of close the last time I checked. I think Crawford might have been like a plus 140 or something
Yeah,
similar
yeah, those
in that
odds like
in
plus
that
140.
range.
Yeah, but like I said, the thing had like for Unibet was plus 128 and Canelo was at minus 167. But that plus 150 for Crawford is pretty much what the lines are right now. You know what I'm saying? Let's see. All right, we going with dogs here. We gonna have some. We gonna be talking some dogs. All right. If you had to pick two dog breeds based on weight, skill, and aggression, which two dog breeds would you compare Canelo and Crawford to? Whoo. Oh man. Oh, good one. Good one. Uh Maybe Canelo is a German Shepherd and Crawford. Oh man.
Like a Chihuahua mentality.
Nah,
Not
nah.
Chihuahua, but
Oh, no, no, no. I take it back. I
nah.
take it back.
Cause you know how they
Yeah, yeah,
feisty,
yeah, yeah,
bro.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I see what you're talking about, though. Chihuahuas don't really, they don't really give a fuck. They don't give a fuck. They
They don't
don't
like
care
being treated
how
like they
big the dog
small.
is. They want to smoke with everybody. They don't care.
They
Right?
feisty.
Yeah, they feisty. But I was gonna say more like a pit bull or something like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay, a breed. I'm gonna say a
Yeah,
mix then. Chihuahua pit mix then.
Chihuahua pit mix. Okay, okay. You know what I'm saying? Because with that or like a Malinois or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
I don't
One,
really know about dogs to
yeah, I feel you. But like, yeah, some of them breeds, man, you'll be like, oh no, but but yeah, I would say either like a German Shepherd or something like that for Canelo, and like a pit bull or something there for Crawford. That's what you got right there with that, man. So that that's how I like would compare the two. But as I said, man, we just days away. I was saying that they're gonna have grand arrivals on Tuesday. They're going to be having open workouts on Wednesday. The press conference is Thursday. The weigh-in is Friday, and then Saturday is the fight. So I will be out there from Wednesday to through Saturday. So as I was mentioning at the top of this podcast, for when they do the open workouts, I'll see like where I'm at, get my bearings and everything like that, and then head out there to the open workout and see what footage I can get during that, and then try to get talk with as many people as I can as far as like the fights are concerned and whatever it is, and get picks and that type of stuff when it comes to that. Now, when it comes to the overall event, we got. Let me see here. I'm gonna post this thing here real quick, man. I got this thing, so I'm gonna share that as well. So here we go. Should be on here. Yeah, here it is. All right. So we got, as I said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Should be 9 total fights there on the card. A number of people are focusing on the first like 6 or so, right?
who the
So
co-main for that joint? I forgot.
man, the co-main, hey, this co-main better be Christian and Billy versus Lester Martinez for that WBC interim super middleweight
Oh yeah,
championship. You
okay.
got, these two guys both undefeated. Christian and Billy there at 29-0. Lester Martinez there at 19-0. They've been around or hovering around that top 5 or 6 or so within the super middleweight division, and Billy has been like number one in the WBC or whatever it is for at least a year and a half or so. And Billy, has had a number of his fights over in Canada. Lester Martinez has fought. You were out there for the Lester Martinez fight versus Carlos Gongora that was at the Care First Arena last year. Of course,
Yeah.
Gongora being the former IBO super middleweight champion. So Martinez has, had his fight against Joshua James, was able to get a stoppage win against him. What was it this year? So he's been like right there on the brink as far as like being a world title contender. And then here going up against Christian and Billy, that's basically the next in line guy now at 168 pounds. So this is going to be a really key fight there at 168. And then you have the rematch between Surrey Boychuk and Brandon Adams. You got two undefeated fighters there in the super welterweight division also with Callum Walsh and Fernando Vargas. The Ivan Disco versus Jermaine Franklin fight in the heavyweight division is going to be really interesting. We got to see where Ivan Disco is at here coming up being undefeated going up against Jermaine Franklin, who, of course, fought like Dylan White, Anthony Joshua there. Of course, that's Topic's favorite fighter. And then you got Steven Nelson here against Reiko Santana. Steven Nelson, coming off of his lone loss that he had there against Diego Pacheco, went through the full, I think it was a full 12 rounds there. He gave a little bit of an effort, but was just outpointed by Diego Pacheco in that fight. But here he's getting right back at it, against Reiko Santana. And, Steven Nelson, I think, was dealing with the injury of sorts in the past. So he hadn't been very active until I think it was last year when he was on that August card in Los Angeles. And then I think the next fight was against Diego Pacheco there. You know what I mean? Another question here from Tim Taylor asks, does the friendliness or aggression between Crawford and Canelo at the weigh-in matter? Nah, I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's going to be to the point where by the time it gets to that, I think you're going to see what the levels are, for both of those guys. Now, like with Terrence Crawford, if it's Terrence Crawford like he was at the weigh-in before his fight against Errol Spence, man, he's going to be 100% locked in and everything like that. Anything that happens at the weigh-in won't really matter to him. You know what I mean? So,
But see, with that, right? I think like that's how you can keep a fighter calm, and that's how you can catch him off guard. When you give him fuel, like for Crawford, he was such a fan underdog that all the noise with a guy that's competitive like that added more fuel. So when people in the crowd just talking and this and that, and you know what I mean, that just make me be like, bet. Like he one of them guys is like, if I say bet, I got something for you.
Yeah.
Bet.
Yeah.
Bet. That's all I'm gonna say. I ain't gonna do too much. Bet. That mean it's on now. You done turn something on to me now where bet. So that's more so what it was. When you calm at the press conference, you're not giving him no energy to go to sleep and think about like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do.
So
when I
then
get
are
my
you gonna
chance.
so then are you like say for example there with the Spence fight, right? Like I talk about the thing with the weigh-in, but when they had the press conference, right? And Terrence Crawford was talking, and then like somebody that was around Errol Spence's group or whatever it is was saying something to him, and then like Terrence Crawford was like saying like I get active or say hey you ain't gonna do this, you ain't gonna do that, you know what I mean, like that type of energy from Terrence Crawford. If he has that, like I said, for example, for the press conference or for even the weigh-in too, like if you see that, then I guess that would kind of, I guess flip a switch for him that says, okay, you know what, I'm going to punish Canelo Alvarez if I hear this or
Right.
whatever this, you know what I mean?
And that's exactly what it, you know what I'm saying? Like It's just like that, bro. It's just like that. Anything where it's like, say you talking to somebody arguing with you, and they say just certain things. It's just like certain arguments that just make you like bet. You know what I'm saying? Like, okay, it gets you more focused. It gets you more locked in. It gets you more into it. You know what I'm saying? With Crawford, that whole fight week, because I was out there for that joint in Vegas, bro. It was so many people. The crowd was probably 65-35 for Spence. You had some people that was rocking with Bud, you know what I'm saying? But
Yeah.
everybody was rocking with Spence. So many people traveling out. Like, bro, the
Yeah,
weigh-in was
yeah,
crazy.
yeah,
And when you a guy like Crawford, you see how he is. He'll size somebody up and just wrestle them down. Or when you a guy like that, they got that chip on your shoulder. It's just like, that's the energy a guy like that needs to get all the way up, where he probably was so locked in during training, so focused, everything. You know what I'm saying? 100% the probably best training camp he's ever had in his entire life. Because the way he was fighting, he was reacting. He wasn't thinking about what I'm gonna do. He was in there just straight up reacting, where
Well,
his timing was so impeccable, that fight, bro.
well, I mean,
Impeccable timing.
in a sense, it was, but given what I was told with someone that was, that's been close to the camp for years, they knew that they had the advantage against Spence, regardless of the condition of Errol Spence going into that fight. They just knew, I guess, because of the fighting style that Errol Spence had, that they say, you know what, we don't necessarily have to do that much in order to properly adjust and basically counter what he's doing. you know. So when that fight happened, it's like, okay, I see what you're doing, but it's like, come on. First off, I'm able to get the reach over you, and then I see that you're not really putting much behind your punches and that you kind of, you're not necessarily there, so to speak, and not very sharp. Oh no, I'm gonna pick you apart. So like Bud's team knew that. Like Esau, Red, Bomac, they knew that. You know, here in this particular fight against Canelo, they might see what Canelo has done in his past few fights, but they're working like saying that they're going up against the best version of Canelo Alvarez that's out there, like it would be Canelo Alvarez in his prime. That's how they're preparing for this particular fight. You know what I mean? So I think that is, how he's going at it. He's out there. He should be out there in Vegas, ready. I guess final preparations, regardless if it's at the top ranked gym or whatever gym they would have. Of course, they got a billion gyms out there. You know what I'm saying? So we'll see how he approaches this coming up against Canelo Alvarez. Shout out to brother Andre Smith there in the live chat. Salute to you here as you're live here on the Boxing Source podcast here. All right, so I'm going to do this quick rundown of the fight card, as I mentioned there, with its co-feature bout Christian and Billy versus Lester Martinez for the WBC Interim Super Middleweight Championship. The rematch between Sergey Boychuk and Brandon Adams, that's going to be pretty interesting. Of course, Brandon Adams had the loss there in that OTX tournament there, you know what I'm saying, with that. Andreas Katsarakis defeating him in that. But now he's going up here against Sergey Boychuk, where Boychuk had the fight against Michael Fox, where a number of people felt that Michael Fox should have won that fight. Talked about the thing there with Callum Walsh and Fernando Vargas, Ivan Disco against Jermaine Franklin in heavyweight divisions, Steven Nelson against Reiko Santana, super middleweight, Muhammad Alakel against Travis Crawford. No, he's not related to Terrence Crawford, y'all. Rado Susumi there against Javier Martinez and Sultan Al Mohamed versus Martin Caraballo. So they got Alakel and Rado Susumi in this thing here, man. They be featuring those guys in these damn cards, boy. That's that'd be crazy, man. I'm telling you, man. What was it? I was at that Rado. What did he have? Who did he go up against there? Susumi. He was on the he was on that fight card with on Queens against Michael Ruiz, man. Yeah, so he
Wasn't
was
he
in
on the
that.
top? I mean, on that Times Square joint too.
Yep, in the Times Square joint. That was his pro debut. And you know what's wild, right? That was a 6-round bout. The fight that he had against Michael Ruiz is a 4-round bout, and now this one here against Javier Martinez is a 6-round bout. That's crazy, crazy work. You know what I'm saying? Crazy work. No, WBA title is on the line. You just seen there, on the screenshot there for BoxRec. BoxRec doesn't really recognize the WBA, so it don't matter if it's the WBA world title. It could be the NABA title, or the interim title for the WBA. Any version of that in any division, you won't see that listed or shown on BoxRec. Okay, so that's you need to talk with the people on BoxRec on why they don't necessarily recognize the WBA. That's actually been the case for a good while now, actually. Uh, but yeah, that kind of like sorts out that whole event that's coming up on Saturday at Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. They will also have on Thursday at the Fontainebleau what they call the Ring Presents the Underdog, where you got to have Jaleel Major Hackett there in this first bout that he's had since his lone loss of his professional career. He's going to be going up against Elijah Vines. You're going to have Justin Valoria versus Josephat Ortiz, Emiliano Alvarado versus Juan Garcia, Jamar Talley against Anthony Holloway, and in the main event, you're going to have Anthony Olascuaga there in his bout where the WBO flyweight championship will be on the line against Juan Carlos Camacho Rivera. So that's 5 fights there on the card. They show the information there. Tickets there through Underdog. You can view it on the Zone, live on the Zone. They got some tickets in the I guess the 200 level, the 300 level. It's kind of the venue is like I would say MGM National Harbor or something like that, or like how a theater is, or like what is it, Hulu Theater, or the theater at Madison Square Garden. That's how this particular venue is for this fight card on Thursday. So that it's a quick rundown on that. But I got my guy Topic on here. Big shout out to Topic for joining on here with us on this edition of the Boxing Source podcast. But we got to go back to Friday night where we had ProBox TV. Okay, and on ProBox TV, right, we had there in the main event Jordan White. They're going up against Renee Tejas for the NABF lightweight title, or vacant lightweight title there. And in that one, you have Renee Tejas being able to get a unanimous decision win over Jordan White, where Jordan White suffered a knockdown in the 5th round. And this one was, where Tejas, he gets his 22nd pro win, and you had Jordan White falling to 19-2. Okay. But as they say, what is it, that Monday morning quarterback, or this is like a Sunday evening reaction here, right? Now, given what was happening there in the weigh-in, one, with this being for a version of a lightweight title, the weight limit is 135 pounds, and you have to be at 135 pounds in order to compete for any version of a lightweight title. Renee Tejas weighed in at 136 1/4 of a pound and did not go for trying to get down to 135. You had Jordan White was able to make that limit or be under that 135 pound limit. The other thing is, you had Jordan White that was competing in the super featherweight division and actually had the version of that super featherweight title actually here before this upcoming fight against Renee Tejas. And so, for me, I'm like this. And Topic will probably say more in reference to this, right? But looking into this and in hindsight or whatever, if it's Jordan White and you're gonna have him compete in a lightweight division in any shape or form, right? Why would it be against Renee Tejas as his first fight in 135 or in the lightweight division? I know that he was, climbing up the rankings at 130 pounds. But here for 135, if you're trying to get your feet wet at 135, then you gotta. I would say it would be against another opponent than Renee Tejas, because Tejas, if y'all know, Tejas has had his fights there against a Floyd Schofield or against a Eduardo Hernandez, and he had fought Alex Del Bagani there at 135 in the same venue a year ago. So he's been there in the 135 division for a good little bit. So he's used to fighting guys of that particular size, not necessarily guys that are coming up from 130 pounds like that. So I'm not all too sure about that. I talked with one person that's been involved in fights with Jordan White, and he kind of like said the same thing. So, topic. Want to get your thoughts about the fight overall, and I guess the situation in having Jordan White fighting Renee Tejas. What were your thoughts about it?
Well, the overall view of the fight, Diaz got that dog in him. Diaz was the better man on that night. Diaz brought relentless pressure, which proposed a big challenge for Jordan White. Jordan White is a puncher. He's used at 130 to making those guys respect him when he starts sending that heat.
Mm-hmm.
When those guys kind of stand down a little bit once they feel some of that power.
Mm-hmm.
But like you say, moving up and weight, the guys that Tejas has been fighting has been at that top. They trending towards that world title, or you know what I'm saying, that level where he's been in the mix, and then he's a natural 135. Where now White's power that he had at 130 kind of mellows out at 35. You know what I mean? Where it might be a little bit more mellowed power, so he could take a punch and still come forward. Um, and that was something, I don't know if White was necessarily expecting,
Mm.
with him usually putting guys down like a lot of his fights. I don't know how many, but uh, I'm gonna say 80% of the fights he's gonna drop a guy.
Mm.
If he don't stop him, they gonna go down at some point in the fight. He's probably the last 6 out of 7, last 8 out of 10, however many, go down at some point in that fight. They gonna hit that canvas. You know what I'm
Mm.
saying? So when
Mm.
you got that kind of mentality, you expecting, okay, all right, if I load up on this one, this gonna be the one to kind of make them back down a little bit. But Tellez was okay. Come on, you know. And sometimes I personally think that could be defeating to a puncher when a guy's waving you on, like when they throw the kitchen sink at a guy and he kind of still coming forward. You're like, oh shoot, hold on, wait. It's like you taking a gun and shooting something like the Terminator, and he's
Mm.
still walking forward. You like, oh shoot, maybe I need a bigger gun. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Maybe I need a bigger gun
Mm.
because this guy's still coming forward.
Right.
But like I say, his tank was there. Tellez was just a better man. I don't want to, say what Jordan White this, that, and make excuses. I want to say Tellez was the better guy.
Okay.
Like I said, he landed a couple good body shots. White couldn't figure out how to answer those. You know what I'm saying? That was
Yeah.
causing a problem for him. He
Yeah.
landed some shots in there that kind of got White's attention, and
Yeah.
that kind of, with him being a little smaller, that's more his work range right there. You
Mm.
know what I'm saying? He was a little more in White's chest, and
Right.
that was his range, that body shot. White's a little taller, so he should have kept it a little bit longer on the outside of the jab,
Mm.
stuff like that. But Tellez was more so, like I say, when he would get in, he was touching them to that body, and we seen, what I'm saying, that kind of changed the dynamic of some of that. So
Mm-hmm.
Tellez bought his A game, he bought his A game. You can't really knock him. He could take a punch, solid guy. He could take a punch, and that was the biggest thing. If you can take a punch from White, it'll be a decent fight. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I say, he could take a punch, and then him landing them body shots. I've never seen White really touch to the body like that, and you know what I mean, kind of on the back foot. But Yeah, that's I say what it was. Diaz kind of was able to find something that we've never really seen before for White.
Mm.
Um, it will be interesting to see, how White bounces back. And like I say, with him moving up to, I'm not mad at that fight. I guess they probably looking at 5 losses. I know the guy that White had just fought in his last fight, Jose, what's his name,
Matias.
Matias,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, him. He beat this guy. He beat
Mm.
Tellez. So I'm assuming, they were gauging that and saying, okay, well, this guy's fought some tough guys. He can give us some good work at this division. He's in the top 100, this and that. And what I mean, this is we can get our feet wet with this guy, but just because some guys lose don't mean they ain't dogs. Because this guy, I think, believe if I'm not mistaken, I think he be training with like Pitbull Cruz. You know what I
Mm.
mean? Sparring Pitbull. So, and that's kind of like who he fought like to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
He reminded me of like a Pitbull Cruz, a 130 version of a 135 version of Pitbull Cruz. Where, hey man, you gonna have to really put some hot heat on me because I'm gonna take a punch. He took
Yeah.
some heat now.
Yeah.
He took a couple punches, but
They did.
when I seen him walking forward, I said, "Oh man, this guy's." I said, "Uh oh."
Yeah.
I said, "Uh oh,
I,
this guy can take some heat."
yeah, he can. Yeah.
Yeah,
My thing was in that first part of the fight, those first few rounds, I seen like a lot of movement there from Jordan White. And I think, at least on my end, I think that he kind of gave Tejas a number of opportunities to try to get to him because even with him like going back, I didn't see him be very active with his hands. You know what I mean? I think he was more about, defensive with the movement, seeing if he could, just touch him here and there, try to wear him down as far as like his energy level when it comes to movement. But give credit to Tejas in his strategy. He was like, okay, you're gonna try to move. I'm gonna see if I can move with you. I'm gonna move with you, and then once I get within range, I'm gonna make sure that my punches are going to count one way or another, whether it's blocked or not. That is going to count. That is going to land on something. That's why he kind of went to the body very early in that fight, and then that kind of like set up the whole shot that had him score the knockdown on Jordan White was because he focused on the body there very early, and then once he was able to kind of like get the guard down a little bit of Jordan White, then he was able to go above that. Now after that, I kind of seen Jordan White get a little bit more active with his hands and then try to, get in there and scrap with Rene Tejas. And when that happened, I think he had more success there, in the ring. And I think maybe he should have, kind of like started off with that particular approach. But, in those first few rounds, he was like, thinking the movement was going to be enough to frustrate Rene Tejas. But Tejas was like, nah, I'm going to see if I can get within range. Once I get within range, I'm going to hit you and I'm going to try to hurt you. And that kind of, made things very troublesome there for Jordan White in those first 5 or 6 rounds. And then he basically had to come back from that knockdown in the fifth, and that's very tough when you have someone that's right there in front of you that's able to take a number of those punches. But in the second half of the fight, a couple of the power punches did do something there too, Rene Tejas, but I guess it wasn't quite enough there for Jordan White to get the win in that sense there. So not sure if there's going to be like a serious setback for him. We got to see what's going to be up for him, what's going to be next. I would say if he feels that he should be at 130 pounds, then maybe kind of continue his career there at 130. But I guess here in this instance, as you were saying, given the scouting of with Rene Tejas having his loss to Jose Matias, that maybe like you said, they thought maybe they could get this win against Tejas to kind of like enter the rankings there in the lightweight division, but it just didn't necessarily happen in this sense.
I'm gonna say that knockdown was more of a flash knockdown where because White's got a chin. You know what I'm saying? I will say that White's got a chin. I don't think that punch was like no.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because if it was, you would have seen him go down again, or you would have seen him.
It would have been like
You
he
know
would
what I
have been
mean?
really like, you know, you like his movement would have been completely different. Yeah, but I mean
Yeah. I think that was
that's
more of
why
a
I said, like, it
he
was
got
more.
laxed,
Yeah, he got lax.
and then
Yeah.
the dude landed a joint like White's was undisciplined defensively. You know what I'm
Mhm,
saying?
mhm.
Kind of with his head on the line and his guard down. And dude just happened to, because you know them guys are compact guys, so when
Yeah,
they throw punches, they not just touching like with somebody with a longer reach. They throwing everything behind them. So I
yeah.
think that was more of a flash one because you seen White get up right away. It's not like he got up and was like wobbling and staggering, and
Mhm.
you seen him get up right away. So that
Yeah.
it was a knockdown, but like I said, I think that more was a flash one than actually like a oh shoot type of knockdown. I
Mhm.
think that was the first time White's ever been down in his career. I still me personally, I think White, a focused Jordan White, knowing what he knows now, could beat this guy if they were to fight again. You know what I'm saying? I personally think so. I think it was things that White could have done to kind of change the dynamic of the fight, like you say,
Mhm.
being probably a little bit more offensively minded instead of just kind
Yeah.
of letting this guy land. I think he could have like been more of a matador, like how they be like running from the bulls or with the what's the little stuff with the
Yeah, you
like
had
the
the matador
flag
in the
or the
pool. Yeah, but I think that he was kind of doing that to start off with. I don't think he needs to, kind of fight, off of his back foot or just trying to move off his back foot. Just try to keep the range there against Rene Tejas. And if he tries to get, anywhere within his range, just, make him pay with the uppercut or a hook or something
right.
and then make him reset. I just felt like with Jordan White's movement there early in the fight, it was more of like him kind of like giving it up, so to speak, as far as like that type of aggression that you could have if you're there
Welcoming
stationary.
it in.
You
He
know,
welcomed that kind of
yeah,
fight.
yeah,
He didn't control it. He kind of allowed this guy right here to push the tempo of it a little bit. That's why I say like I think White could beat this guy if he's more focused. Because like you say, early on in the fight, um, he didn't do enough to let this guy know. Listen, we're not doing none of that. You know what I mean? We're not gonna have that
yeah,
kind of thing going on where this guy started to feel more, compelled. And like I say, when you fighting a guy that's a puncher like that, when you land your, because White's got some power in them hooks. That's White's punch right there. He said a lot of them guys down with them hooks. Um,
hmm
Once he landed a couple of those, and the guy kind of like didn't deter, and he's coming forward still. It's like, okay, this little dude right here serious. You know what I mean? Like I said, I think when he landed like the body shot or something like that, that might have,
hmm
you know. But I think White I think White definitely, no question. I think he can get back to there. This was a good fight. I respect boxing. I respect the sport. I respect the game. This was a good fight for White to see. Because this guy right here is gonna help him propel to those next. You need these kind of fights.
yeah,
You know what I mean? You need these kind of fights to figure out X, Y, and Z. Because if he's in there with a guy that don't fight like this guy, a pressure puncher, it's a wrap. You know what I'm saying? It's a wrap. So this is good that he was able to face a guy like this to kind of help him pinpoint some of the things he got to sharpen his tools up on and be able to, continue to ascend to the next level, especially him coming in at 135.
yeah,
To me, this might have been, I can't think of all the guys he's fought, but I think this might have been one of the most like battle tested at the highest level guys he's fought,
yeah,
despite the 5 losses. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
he's fought some pretty decent
You
names. So
know,
he's
Hall
been
of
in the
Fame,
mix. He done seen some styles.
Yeah.
So this guy's been under that
I
fire.
said,
He's been under that fire.
like I said, I mean, he fought Floyd Schofield Jr. He's fought, Eduardo Hernandez there around at 130. Alex Delmagani had that win against him there. Fought guys that have had like pretty good records,
The
over
dude Matias.
he fought Giovanni Cabrera, he's fought Michelle Rivera, so that's almost like a who's who around that, middle or top 15 or top 25 or so level. They're within 135 pounds. So that kind of like is a good gauge there to see where Jordan White is at as far as like his first fight at 135. So, I mean, maybe he get, once he gets back in, if he has another fight there at 135, then he could, have a more impressive showing against an opponent there at 135 before trying to attempt to get in the rankings there for 135 pounds if he continues his career there on that front, right?
I say rematch him. You know how I'm tired.
Yeah, yeah, I feel you.
Rematch him.
Yeah, yeah,
Run it right back.
running right
I
back.
think I think White, like you say, allowed certain things. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I think I definitely think White allowed this guy to kind of get more comfortable than what he should have. I think a turned on White, where he's coming out with that big, strong jab, he's got those long, rangy arms, instead of allowing himself to be in range of a shorter fighter with snubbier arms, to be within that distance. He
Mm-hmm.
should have been, anytime he got crossed I don't know if you've seen the movie Life,
Oh,
that
yeah,
gun line. If he crossed that gun line, there's repercussions. There
complications.
wasn't enough repercussions for him crossing that gun line, boss. So that's why I think if White
I want
goes
that
back,
pie. I don't care. I want that
you,
pie, Claude.
you know what I'm saying? If White goes back, watches the tape, and sees the things he could have cleaned up, I think, because when, like you say, the later half of the fight,
Yeah,
um, once he start figuring out, like, okay, I gotta go,
yeah.
and he start letting his hands go a little bit more and doing, you could see, like, okay, if you would have started doing this a little earlier, we might could have had a toss up.
Exactly.
He allowed the guy to get too comfortable.
Right.
And if he would have, what I'm saying, like kind of landed those punches right there, but then still at the same time, not like, my thing with White for that night,
Mm-hmm.
he would, like, because I guess he's a taller fighter, he would shell up a little bit and lean forward and
Say it.
lean up towards, yeah. Why are you coming into his gun line now?
Mm.
You should
Yeah.
be just 1-2, wop, 1-2, wop, wop, hook, turn, move.
Yep.
1-2, move. And if he get in there, up, move, until you can control him where you need to. You shouldn't be standing toe to toe with a guy who can't get in. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like I said, I more credit to Tellez. Salute to Tellez. He was the better man that night. Good fighter, man. I would love to see him against a lot of these 135 guys. Like, if you want to get up there, this, forget them 5 losses. This guy's gonna bring some
Yeah, he's
some
gonna bring it.
some
He's definitely
action
gonna
to
bring
you.
it. Yep.
He's gonna bring some work to you. Now maybe if White did take one fight, maybe, I don't know, at 135, just to acclimate, maybe, then Tellez on the second part of that to say, okay, I'm here, but hey, it is what it is. I don't think this is like, too much of a setback. I don't want to put too much stock into this loss,
Right. Yeah.
um, because he's still up there. He was an NABF champion, so he's gonna hold a solid
Right.
ranking within the
Right.
system.
I
He's
mean,
not
yeah,
gonna fall too
yeah. If
far to the
he,
back of the line.
yeah, that's the thing. If he was able to go back, to 130 pounds, he still, have that standing as an NABF champion at 130. That was the thing about it. He had already was holding the NABF title there at 130 pounds. Just here, making that attempt for the 135 version of the
And see,
title.
at 35, it's tight, right? I mean, at 130, it's like ain't no. big fights that's gonna really just happen. I think with Oshaki and that
Oh,
WBC belt, because I think that's the only sanctioning body that White's in.
yeah.
WBC. I think that's tied up. And Shock might after that. Who knows? So I don't know where he could have went with in the 130 division to really, hey, but I think he could be at 35. Like I say, this is a good fight. It was a good fight. I still think there's little things he could have just cleaned up that he didn't need to make. He made that fight harder on himself
Hmm.
than what it should have been. But like I say, salute to Diaz. We're not going to discredit his performance. He was the better man, and it was his night. So that was a good card all the way top to
Yeah.
bottom, though.
Oh yeah. It was
I
a
didn't
good
get a
fight.
chance to see all of the fights, but I
Yeah,
seen
man.
Suleiman was in a good fight.
Hey,
I forgot who fought before Suleiman and
yeah,
them. That was a good
Cardoso versus
fight.
Torres. I mean, hey, I tell you what, I was there from fight one to the main event. So that means I was there from like 5 p.m. until 12:15, 12:20 a.m., right? And, after, Frankie Scarborough's fight against Kevin Pichahita, I was looking at these three fights and I was like saying, oh man, we could have like all of these be all 10 rounders. But those two that happened before the main event, Sagawa was able to properly, execute there against Brian Acosta and outwork him and get a stop his victory, man. So that was, real good on his part to get that victory there. Of course, coming off of that close loss to Bruce Carrington. You know what I mean? I know that Brian Acosta
And
had the one loss
look,
to Cardenas, but yeah, go ahead.
and not to cut you off, Suleiman is one of those kind of guys like the guy we just was talking about in the main event. He's
Taylor?
got a couple losses,
Yeah,
but don't let that fool you.
right.
Because Suleiman will come in, you know what I mean? I think, in my opinion, I think that fight that he had with Shushu was a little closer than what they gave him.
Right,
I
yeah,
think it was a little home cooking on that one.
right. You know,
So, Suleiman's a good guy, 125. I would love to see him get a chance at run it back with Shushu. I wouldn't mind seeing that because he's up there in the rankings. You know what I'm saying? I think he climbed, he's like number 9 or something like that. He's in the top 10 or
he
something.
was at number what? I thought he was at like number 5 or something at the WBC. No, number 6. Number 6 in the WBC.
So I wouldn't honestly mind seeing him get a rematch.
Yeah.
I think with Shushu got the intern title right
Yeah, he
now,
got the
don't he?
interim title. He got the interim title.
Who's the full champ? Oh,
Full champ
Schoolboy.
is yeah. Yeah, cool
I
boy.
wouldn't mind seeing him run it back. I'm dead serious. I wouldn't mind seeing him run it back with
Now,
Shushu.
it's either that or uh see, here's the thing with like a fighter like Suleiman, right? Is that he doesn't have enough of a following to make him like not even a headliner, but a fighter to be like on the A side of a card that could have 2 or 3 fights ahead of him. So, like for example, I say if he fights like a Carlos Castro, maybe that could be a potential fight for Suleiman Sagawa if Bruce Carrington is not available, or against someone like a former world champion like Odebek Komatov or Joet Gonzalez, who's been a multiple-time world title contender. Who just had his loss to Brandon Figueroa, where some people may have thought that he could have got the better of Brandon Figueroa. So actually, that fight right there would be really good for Suleiman Sagawa if he's able to get that maybe before the end of the year or something like that. Because him being like one of the contenders out there in the division, I think he could have something like that and get back into world title contention. Hey, shout out to Jaime Alvarado. I'm definitely going to mention that fight. Just wait, I'm definitely going to mention that fight here coming up. You know what I mean? Smitty here. Shout out to Smitty in the building. He says if Cool Boy wins against Shock, yeah, he's definitely dropping his belt at 126. He's not gonna, come back down if he defeats Shocky Foster on October 25th at the MGM Grand Garden Arena in Las Vegas. So yeah, but with Suleiman Sagawa, he's there. He's been a tough out for anybody that he's went up against. Like I said, he's had the fights against Bruce Carrington, Mirko Cuello, who's like a title contender here at this particular point. Had that win against Ruben Villa, last year. So that should tell you where he's at this particular instance. Now, they say that he could be lined up for a fight in Africa. I have to follow up with that. I got to see if I could find out who the contact is for Suleiman Sagawa and see if that is something for real that he's going to be fighting in Kinshasa or something like that. So, but with that being said, props to Sagawa on his win that he had, and then you had the fight between Jonathan Cardoso and Luis Torres. That was a good scrap of sorts. And then in round 9, Luis Torres caught that knockdown. I was actually surprised that was going to be a knockdown. Now, it was a good scrap, but the thing is, Torres had to deal with that cut that happened in the first round that was through head clashes. And, he had to deal with all of that. A lot of blood was, being lost over the course of that fight, round by round. In Torres's corner, you had Coach Bob Santos there. Of course, a number of people would know Coach Bob Santos. After the fight was over, man, Santos was super heated, because he was like, the referee didn't do nothing to really reprimand Cardoso, with the roughhousing or the headbutts and that type of stuff. And yeah, after the fight, in the post-fight, well, we didn't have a post-fight pressure, but out in the locker rooms and stuff, he was talking and he was like saying, like, man, they were letting them do Cardoso do all of this, all of that, and we could have had the fight stopped in the 4th round, go to the cards or whatever it was. But he said, no, we're gonna get through this and we're just gonna beat him up. And well, that's what pretty much happened. He beat him up, but the scorecards had it like pretty close there. They had 2 scores of 77-75 in favor of Torres, but 1 score of 78-74 in favor of Cardoso. So if that went through that full 10 rounds, who knows what the result would have been for that. So that was kind of something. And quick rundown, rest of the card. Frankie Scarborough Jr. getting a unanimous decision win over Kevin Pedrahita. Pedrahita was a replacement opponent for Francois Scarborough Jr. He was supposed to face D'Angelo Keys, but Keys, I guess they say he was like way over or something like that, because this particular fight was at 135 pounds, and Frankie Scarborough was intending to fight at 130 pounds, or at least a couple of pounds above that, because he is at super featherweight. He competes at super featherweight. He's not going to be competing in the lightweight division. So he had that. Trayvon Marshall with the unanimous decision win. Irvin Fuller got the stoppage. Scooter Davis was on the card. He had a double body shot, got the knockout win. Ben Johnson got a knockout win in the 5th round, stoppage win in the 5th round. Who else we had? Jordan Roach with the stoppage win as well. Jeff Yu got a stoppage win. Eric Hernandez too. Hey, what was that? 12 fights? That was 12 fights on that ProBox card, man. It was absolutely crazy there, man.
Frankie, that guy that Frankie fought that was a good fight for him too.
Yeah, it was a good scrap. It was a good scrap. But like I was saying, they tried to have that fight. As long as Frankie Scarborough was able to have a fight, that's what they wanted. You know what I mean? And the thing about that was, what would I say? Like a couple weeks or a few weeks before, I had word that it could have been potentially that D'Angelo Keys wouldn't be able to be in the fight because of, I guess, the weight issues. So
I would give that joint the fight of the night, bro. To me, in my opinion,
yeah, pretty much was the fight of the night as far as the back and forth and everything like that. But that to me kind of shows the level of where Frankie Scarborough could be at. You know what I mean? Y'all could check out, post fight interview there that's on the YouTube channel here currently. You know what I'm saying? A big ups to Scooter Paul, man. Yeah, it's been a good little bit, man. Salute to you, man. Still, doing the thing here with the Box Source podcast and all that type of stuff. But yeah, Frankie Scarborough was able to do his thing. Ben Johnson, had a little bit of back and forth there with his opponent, uh, Luis Ramos, but then was able to get a stoppage victory there because Luis Ramos had some eye issues or whatever it is there that had him like his vision was kind of messed up, so he couldn't get through those last couple of rounds. Irvin Fuller with the stoppage win there against Dominic Griffin, and of course Derek Scooter Davis getting that win over Leandro Medina there with that stoppage win. And hey, big things are going to be happening there for Derek Scooter Davis. We can't necessarily say much about it quite yet, but if you were in the arena or you were basically on the floor level there in the arena for when Derek Scooter Davis was fighting, you probably seen a person that is close to or pretty much one of the main guys for another promotional company, a well-known promotional company. So with that being said, you know what's next for Derek Scooter Davis, okay? Like you don't really have to have that many guesses as to who Derek Scooter Davis could be involved with in the near future. All right, so there's that. All right, wanted to get to this particular fight that happened yesterday. That was for the IBF Super Featherweight Championship. You had Eduardo Sugar Nunez there against Christopher Diaz for that IBF Super Featherweight title. And yeah, it was a unanimous decision victory in favor of Eduardo Nunez. But man, live on the zone, listen, from probably round 3 up until the 12th round, that was a great, super great fight. I'm telling you, right? They went back and forth. You had some tough moments, there with like adversity. Hey, Sugar Nunez had to deal with the cut above his eye in the back half of the fight. But for me, live, it was a 2 knockdown. So he scored on Chris Diaz in the 7th round for him to basically get the victory. The scores kind of read, 2 scores of 117, 109, and one score of 116, 110 in favor of Eduardo Sugar Nunez. But Chris Diaz definitely made this a fight, right? Definitely made this a fight. And one thing that kind of like stood out was you go through 9 rounds. He already been knocked down twice. He kind of was getting back into it as far as like the whole, ebb and flow in the fight. Chris Diaz was getting back into the fight. But before round 10, his trainer was going in. He was like, man, fuck this, man. This could be your last shot of the world title. He's had, a couple of chances to win a world championship and fell short. This was, I think, his 3rd opportunity at a world title. So he's like, yo, this could be your last shot. You might never get an opportunity like this again, especially with him, having a record of 30-5 going into the bout there against Sugar Nunez, right? So he's like, yo, you going to have to get at him. And he definitely did there for those last 3 rounds. I'm telling you, that 12th round between Nunez and Diaz, that's a candidate, easy candidate for round of the year right there, man. And I'm going to tell you something, right? The uppercut that Chris Diaz landed on Sugar Nunez in the 12th round, I don't know how Nunez was able to stay up from that uppercut because he got caught clean. And I'm telling you, clean. And he was still able to, stay up. But there was like a number of shots, power shots landed on Eduardo Nunez that I felt like he could have went down, and he still didn't go down. So props to him on that. But he's still able to keep that IBF belt. After the fight, they had the WBO champion there that was in attendance, and they were talking about, hey, that could potentially be a bout there to look at for a unification, between him and Navarrete, because Navarrete was there in attendance. Now, Navarrete, had his controversial win against Charlie Suarez there earlier this year, and we haven't seen anything in reference to ordering a rematch there for the WBO. So maybe they're trying to see if they can link that in. But hey, we'll see what happens. But a unification bout between Nunez there and Emmanuel Navarrete, that would be a fire fight for sure. And if they had it before the end of this year, we could have another candidate for fight of the year. You know what I'm saying? So you do have that. I'm not sure if you're able to catch that on the zone topic, but if not, and you're able to see it, you got to see it, man. You got to see it. That was like a great fight.
When are they trying to line that up?
Well, which one?
The Nunez joint and
Nunez.
Navarrete.
Nunez. Well, they're gonna try to do it here after Nunez win, but given the situation with Navarrete and that fight that he had against Charlie Suarez, I don't know how that's going to work. Maybe they could have something with Top Rank, given that Top Rank's not really active right now as far as like setting up fights. So they could be, subcontracting in a sense, some of these fighters to have fights outside of the Top Rank banner or something like that. So with that being said, if the WBO had a ruling there in reference to Navarrete's fight against Charlie Suarez, then how is that going to work if like say for example, if Matchroom wants to set up a fight between Sugar Nunez and Emmanuel Navarrete? Now, given that Nunez does have a cut suffered above his eye, I don't think he's going to be necessarily ready like right off the rip though. So that could give that opportunity to have the rematch between Navarrete and Suarez, for that to take place first, and then see if Navarrete wins. Then you could have that unification fight. You know what I mean? Oh, real quick, and got Adam here in the building, and shout out to Scooter Powell. Yeah, man. Thanks for subscribing. We're just getting a little bit closer there, around like 3,000 subscribers on the YouTube channel here. But we just doing our thing here with the Boxing Source podcast every Sunday night. Brother Adam checks in here on the live chat on YouTube and says, "Who do you have versus a Parker versus Wardley fight?" Good one. Good one. This is going to be, well, for now, it's going to be for the WBO interim championship. Okay. Given Alexander Usyk say that he's not necessarily in a condition to defend his world titles. So Joseph Parker being the WBO mandatory, well, not necessarily. That doesn't necessarily put him in a position to fight Alexander Usyk, right? So, and for the time being, you have Joseph Parker fighting Fabio Wardley. Yeah, that I see. That's going to be a real interesting situation. So,
Hey, can I once you finish,
all right.
I don't want to interrupt. I want to put the joint we was talking about, the retirement joint, um the legend killer. The legend killer. I want to put that on the air. Let's see, man. See what the people think about that. The legend killer.
Okay, yeah. We'll talk about that after this one. Yeah, for sure. We'll talk about that. All right. So with this fight here, that's slated, and it's going to be, for at the time, it's going to be for the interim title. Okay. I still would favor Joseph Parker given his level of experience. Okay. Fabio Wardley, yeah, he's kind of like climbed up the rankings here a little bit in the heavyweight division of sorts. But I still would kind of put Joseph Parker there. Of course, he has been the former WBO heavyweight champion. But I think that he will have his experience level be enough over Fabio Wardley to get the win there. That's going to be, this is scheduled for October 25th at the O2 Arena in the UK. So I say that I would favor Joseph Parker in that. Now, with it being in the heavyweight division and with Joseph Parker being the WBO interim champion, there is a fighter that is ranked number one in the WBO. And that particular fighter, as topic is brought up, is as he nicknames him the Legend Killer, Moses Atama, who's undefeated, of course, there at 20 years old and had his fight where he dispatched of Dylan White within 1 round. He has only had 13 professional bouts, and as I mentioned, he is there at 20 years old and has like a version of a heavyweight belt, the Intercontinental Championship, there for the heavyweight division. Okay, what's going to be next for him? Who knows? But Topic has a suggestion on who Moses Atama could fight next. Topic, who is this particular fighter that you have in mind for Moses Atama?
Okay, well, they're pushing Moses as the next great British heavyweight, right? Who is the current guy? Who's the current face of the British heavyweight division?
AJ.
I think a fight between Anthony Joshua and Moses would be a great torch passing fight. Okay, one, if AJ wins, he's back. He's back. But if Moses wins, there's no better way to pass the torch and keep Britain, in a great light than to pass that torch, Anthony Joshua, like a Klitschko, to basically say, hey, this young guy right here, like helping him, not helping him, but like, giving him that opportunity to take over the reins. Moses and Tamu versus AJ. Hey, I like that fight. The young guy, they putting some stock in him. Anthony Joshua is the guy for Britain. Well, Tamu's what, like 20?
Yeah, so 20 years old.
So he's got at least, I would give him on the short end, 10 years of reign left in him. Realistically, AJ's 75% out the door. 75% out the door. We might as well see him fight in Wu. And if Ntanwu wins, then it's basically like an announcement to Britain that, hey, hear he. Your royalty has arrived. We're going to pack AJ up and let him go down the canal, man. And we're going to send him down to a little boat on the prairie. But, Eddie Hearn ain't going to let that happen. But,
See, we've had this conversation before as far as like this potential matchup, and the thing is, like as you mentioned, that it could be a potential passing of the torch there. Now, my thing was that we, at least for me, we already had that fight, and that was last year at Wembley Stadium when Anthony Joshua faced Daniel Dynamite Dubois, and when Daniel Dubois was able to, have the knockout over Anthony Joshua, that should have been that passing of the torch moment, because especially with me being there live, right? You see the vision of being out there at Wembley Stadium, okay? And I like talked about it after that fight. I'll talk about it now. If you go to Wembley Stadium, like say for example, you go there like through the subway, the train station, or whatever it is. You get out this train station, you're heading towards Wembley Stadium, right? And I'm telling you, like that walkway heading towards the stadium is like one of those things where like how you got, what is this guy? What was it like? How you talk about Augusta for the Masters tournament, or like going to Wimbledon or something like that? I don't know, man. But that vision is like saying the so-called, like how you view Madison Square Garden as like the mecca for like sporting events in the U.S. Wembley Stadium is almost like the mecca of sorts there for the UK. So you have that walkway out there, right? And going through the walkways, there's a whole bunch of banners of Under Armour promoting Anthony Joshua, right? So it's almost like, as some would say, the Anthony Joshua show. So that's how they kind of like, promoted that event there as like the Anthony Joshua show, and Daniel Dubois is just like second fiddle. He's, just the B side. He's blah, 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 right? Then Daniel Dubois does what he does and takes out Anthony Joshua, stops him, knocks him out. And after the fight, it's like Anthony Joshua, gives him props, does that, and it's almost like that would be that passing of the torch moment, right? But for me, there live, I guess it necessarily wasn't, because Daniel Dubois doesn't have that type of demeanor to where he could be like an Anthony Joshua, where he could be presented to the public, like he could be marketed, he could be on, commercials and that type of stuff. He doesn't necessarily have that type of mentality. And of course, with his fight against Alexander Usyk, you kind of found out more about him. So yeah, it just wouldn't work. Here in this sense here with Moses Atama, do we get that same type of vibe from Moses Atama? Now, I wouldn't necessarily say he's similar to Daniel Dubois in that sense, but he's there at 20 years old. Like, would you put someone at 20 years old in that type of stage there this early in his career? Like I said, he's only had 13 professional fights at this point. So I don't know if that's going to work here for someone like Moses Atama. And actually, for right now, I don't know what would necessarily be next for Moses Atama. It wouldn't be against like someone like an Anthony Joshua. They'll probably put him in there against like a shoot. Well, not even like a Derek Chisora. It could be like a Philip Hergovich. Actually, that could probably be the next fight there for Moses Atama, because if you're gonna have Joseph Parker there defending that WBO interim championship, or it could be for the full championship, Moses Atama versus Philip Hergovich could be that final eliminator of sorts there for that WBO title. So I just don't see Atama being the guy going up against Anthony Joshua next. Hold on. Shout out to Scooter Powell here in the live chat. He said AJ's watch Slim. And he said, speaking of UK fighters, was Hamza Shiraz beating Berlanga with the loaded rap? No. Listen, you're under the New York State Athletic Commission, and the New York State Athletic Commission, sanctions the fight. One, if it was loaded, if it was wrapped a certain way, or anything like that, the representative for the New York State Athletic Commission would be able to, be able to point that out. One, and then two, then that should be on the corner of Edgar Berlanga, because once those hands are getting wrapped, not only the representative from the New York State Athletic Commission is there in the locker room, but a representative from Edgar Berlanga's team is there in the locker room, seeing those hands getting wrapped. So if there was anything that was off, if there was anything that didn't look right, they should have been able to point it out. They didn't point it out. And it is what it is. And given the whole thing with the wraps, wasn't it Berlanga's girlfriend or wife or whatever that first pointed it out? I'm like, come on. You know what I mean? So to me, I didn't think that was much of a story to begin with, because, as I said, that's on the New York State Athletic Commission. Now, given the history of the New York State Athletic Commission, hey, I wouldn't say that, it's not completely out of the possibility. We're talking about the New York State Athletic Commission here. Y'all saw what happened on March 1st. So, you know what I mean? Why didn't he take the wrap off? Hey, I'm saying there's a lot of instances where after fights, the fighters don't necessarily take the wrap off until much later or whatever it is, or if they for example, after the fight takes place, then they wait until they get in the locker room in order for those wraps to be taken off and that type of
They
stuff.
might not have had no scissors to cut them off at that time.
And that too. So there it is. You know what I'm saying? So that that's what I got in reference to that particular instance. All right. So last thing I got here, real quick. we had the recent announcement from Mike Tyson. Listen, Mike, listen. This is what we're gonna do. I know what I did against Jake Paul. But this time around, I'm gonna get Floyd Mayweather. I'm gonna knock him out. Yeah, it's an exhibition, but man, to have that announcement though, right? And that, hold on, I'm gonna see if I can go to that particular post from Mike Tyson in on X, right? Because like I'll tell y'all, man, I saw it on Instagram first, right? And I was like, listen, I'm old, all right. There was like when I saw it, like I was getting up from a nap, right? And then I see this thing on September 4th on Instagram, and I'm like, wait, Mike Tyson. And it's a blue check too, so you know it's Mike Tyson. So I'm like, Mike Tyson, and I see Mayweather and Tyson. I'm like, what? I was like, oh, you got to be kidding me, right? But no, so it's signed for 2026. As it says, legend versus legend, Mike Tyson, Floyd Mayweather. There, that's going to be happening, right? And yeah, Tyson does hate Floyd in real life. Hey, listen, Roy Jones Jr. hates Floyd in real life too. You know what I'm saying? So that's the crazy part about it. So you mean to tell me that they're gonna actually do business with each other? That's insane. All right, so I should have this thing on here live, and you see as the poster is there signed and whatnot, right? So up to this point, right now, there are 18 million views of that particular post from Mike Tyson announcing that he and Floyd Mayweather are stepping into the ring in 2026. So that's gonna be crazy. Now I've said here initially that they may push to have this fight on Cinco de Mayo weekend in 2026. Don't be surprised if that's the case, right? And after that announcement happened, a couple folks that been in the boxing game for years hit me up and said, "Hey, look, if it's in Vegas, I'm going. I don't care if I'm in the arena or not. I'm going because I'm telling you, actually, you know what? It should be in Vegas. If Vegas knows better, it should be in Vegas. If they're gonna talk about, oh, there's not that much tourism. Tourism is down in Vegas. People aren't going to the hotels. Everything is expensive and all that type of stuff. This event right here, oh my God, that could potentially resurrect Las Vegas right now. You have the two most popular fighters in the sport over the past 40 years in the ring together. Who would have ever thought that that would happen in any capacity? But now it could be possible now for 2026. That's absolutely insane. You know what I mean? But I think it goes to what has happened over the course of the past few years, and some people may not think that this is the case, but you have Floyd Mayweather that's had exhibitions, right? You've had Mike Tyson have an exhibition with Roy Jones Jr. in 2020 that had over what, a million buys, right? Then last year you had Mike Tyson in the ring there against Jake Paul. Now you're gonna see Jake Paul against Tank Davis at State Farm Arena in Atlanta, Georgia, in November. This type of thing that's like kind of outside of the main thing that's going on within the sport of boxing has kind of made it be a whole lot more popular than what's going on currently in the sport of boxing. We got this thing that's happening for September 13th for the undisputed super middleweight championships of the world between Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Crawford. But you bring up, as I said, Jake versus Tank for November. Now this coming up for 2026. Those two events right there could dwarf what's going to be happening next Saturday or this coming Saturday. He says, are they gonna really throw hands or spar for a bag? All right. Remember, the fight between Tyson and Roy Jones was an exhibition fight, and Roy Jones was saying, "Listen, I don't know if Tyson really knew if this was an exhibition or a real fight. Listen, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but given the initial reaction to this, I'm telling you, the overall scene is going to be crazy. It's going to be insane. But you also got to take into account what could happen at the State Farm Arena in November with that exhibition fight between Jake Paul and Tank Davis. Because if that gets a crazy amount of views, or the viewership is like through the roof, they're gonna do the same thing here with Floyd Mayweather and Mike Tyson. You might see it there on Netflix or whatever, and if they put it on Netflix, those views is gonna be absolutely insane for that. So that to see that like really shocked me though. What did you think about the topic?
Um, I was surprised, bro. I'm like, what the heck? What
Yeah,
the heck? I thought after that last out, and I thought Mike was just gonna stick to podcasting and being a legend. You know what I mean?
or
I didn't expect, because I don't instantly I think about like, how is this fight gonna look? Is
mm,
Floyd gonna look like a young guy in there? You know what I mean?
mhm.
Boxing circles around Tyson. Like, I mean, like I said, all these exhibit. I mean, if you're gonna do exhibition, make it make sense. You know, Pacquiao versus Floyd would be a great exhibition. I would like to see an exhibition with Pacquiao versus Floyd. That would get me excited. Floyd versus like some of these other old guys,
Or Floyd,
Shane
like Floyd
Mosley.
versus Adrian Broner. Now Adrian Broner is actually going to be in a fight here in the near future. You know what I'm saying? Adrian
Ah,
Broner's been calling for that.
Bronner got to lock all the way in. I think he's still got some distractions that stop him from outside. You know what I'm saying? Outside the ring
Mhm.
distractions, but if he can
Yo,
get fully locked in, then maybe. But I don't. It's just like, what is this going to look like? Is this just a robbery of the fans? Like, everybody just like,
nah,
what the heck do we just watch? Or is this going to
nah.
be something like, oh, okay, we actually like
It's
watching this?
yeah, but it's a result of these past events that have happened. I mean, Floyd Mayweather has been involved in exhibition fights for what at least a few years now with
Did
the
you watch any of those?
now me. Not really, not that much. Okay, except
Okay.
for the one, except for the one that he had against that what was it, that flyweight, that tension. Yeah, I saw that one. That was some great stuff. That was some great stuff. He made the dude cry. Like, come on, man, that was funny as shit.
I
But
seen one joint, bro, where he freaking like substituted the judge in the middle of, I mean,
oh
the
yeah,
ref in
yeah,
the middle of the
the
fight.
John Gotti fight or whatever, whoever his name is.
Like, bro, what?
Yeah, like yo,
I
but
said, I don't want to see
hey,
this no more, bro.
nah,
And once I seen that, I said, okay, yeah,
but
I don't want to see it.
but like to Scooter Power's point though, if Tank Davis puts Jake Paul on his ass, Tank becomes a megastar. I mean, Tank Davis, one of the most polarizing figures in boxing right now. They say he's the face of boxing. You got Jake Paul, who's been able to make the impact that he's had there in the sport of boxing ever since starting out his career, what it was about 5 years ago, So he's another polarizing figure inside boxing and outside of boxing. So with them making that particular fight, they know that there's a lot of people that are going to be tuning in for that. Okay. And it's going to be on Netflix. So if Tank does do that, whether it's exhibition or not, listen, his level of superstardom would go through the roof. So it wouldn't really matter. Well, actually, it doesn't matter at this point who Tank Davis fights. Okay. People go out to see him. People know it's an event. You don't care who the opponent is, right? Only like boxing fans that are like hardcore boxing fans care about who the opponent is for Gervonta Tank Davis. But this particular fight, was in the works for some time. So now, with it being a reality, we're gonna see how big of an event this is gonna turn out to be. Right now, I don't know about the press conference that's gonna be happening in New York City, but then the press conference that's gonna be in Atlanta, Georgia for this particular fight, you're gonna see how many people are gonna be in attendance for that press conference, and that could give you a little bit of a gauge of how many people are going to be following that. So these type of events, it's events. That's the thing about it, is that you don't necessarily have any fighters out there right now that could, if you pair them up with the right person, that it makes it an event. We're gonna see what happens here on Saturday, right? But outside of that, and you see the circumstances behind that, these guys aren't necessarily in the same division. It's Crawford going up 2 weight classes, so to speak, to challenge Canelo Alvarez, right? But you don't necessarily have something to the point where you got two fighters within the same division that have a following big enough to where it makes it a super fight. We haven't had that since Mayweather versus Pacquiao in May of 2015. So that's why these days a lot of people are kind of like going towards these exhibition fights and seeing these matchups that wouldn't necessarily happen in a real sanctioned fight, but if they're able to do it in an exhibition, then hey, let's get it going. You know what I mean?
And why do you think that is, bro? Like, where do you think the decline of the sport, as far as like
Multifaceted.
fighter notoriety? Yeah, I mean, because like you say, back in the day, the '90s is just
Yeah,
like
but
we
yeah,
knew the
but
fighters.
multifaceted. So I mean, I kind of like went through this as far as like the history of the sport in the history of sports, right? Because you have guys like a Muhammad Ali, right, or even as Sugar Ray Leonard. I'd say that period right there with Sugar Ray Leonard, Tommy Hearns, Roberto Duran, that particular era, I think that is the era of where boxing as like a top level sport within America at the very least kind of like ended, because you had the rise of the National Basketball Association, Magic versus Bird, Jordan coming in, all of that stuff, and the whole new deal with the NBA, getting them, up there, and then the National Football League and their popularity just shooting over the roof, right? So with that, you not only have them being more popular, you have the young people coming up saying, instead of going through boxing, I'm going to see if I can get in through basketball or football, much more than what they were doing back then. So a lot of those people that could have potentially been fighters didn't necessarily go that route. They went through, basketball, football, could be even baseball, other sports instead of boxing. And as they say, you can't play boxing. So that was part of it. And then the other thing was like the way that boxing had been promoted changed significantly when they went from broadcast television to cable and closed circuit television or pay per view. So once we went to that, then you didn't necessarily have the viewership like you had before, like for a Hagler Hearns or a Leonard versus Hagler or something like that. Like a lot of those fights were like on ABC, Wild World of Sports or whatever it was. So you you can't get that anymore. Instead, like you're not gonna see boxing on network TV. They tried it with Premier Boxing Champions, and look how far that went. That's one, and then two. Even right now, as far as like developing young fighters, you don't have enough to kind of like gradually build them up and then have them be at the top level to where a lot of people could follow them. So, and that's just scratching the surface as far as I'm concerned when it comes to overall issues as far as like popularity of the sport and the popularity of fighters in general too. So
I
it's
think, bro, some of these guys, I think these guys then got a little too Hollywood. Like, I think you should get compensated for sure, but it's like
yeah,
you gotta build your fan base. Whereas, like, I was talking to one of the legendary figures, and I don't want to say legendary. Well, one of the well-known figures in the boxing world, and
Mm-hmm.
he was telling me, he was at the fight. He was telling me
Yeah.
basically like how he covered, like Muhammad Ali and stuff like that back in
Yeah.
the day, and he
Right.
worked with
Yeah.
fighters, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And he was giving me like some of his insight, and I'm like, okay, I understand. And he was saying like, you know, guys don't put that work in as much as far as like fighting in like Wichita, Kansas, where Wichita, that crowd
Yeah.
out there can say, I've seen him fight before. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Or fighting in these different spots where you're
Well,
putting yourself in those markets. So
yeah.
that way, when it comes time for the big one, they'll travel out there because they've had a chance to
Mm-hmm.
feel your energy in the room before. You know what I'm saying? Versus just like,
Just being in one specific area. Yeah.
right. You know what I mean? Where it's like little things like that you building
Right.
your fan base off of. And then these guys be outpricing each other, outpricing themselves too.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing, and I pointed this out when it came to like the whole thing as far as like how specific fighters like at a certain level fought guys that were like 76 or whatever. I mentioned the thing as reference to social media, instant reporting, and having people on some method of television the whole time, right? They didn't have that back then. What they had was word of mouth, right? And
Correct.
when you have something like that, it makes you as a fighter or as an athlete be have a status that's a lot that could be a lot bigger than maybe it actually was. But you were almost like a mythical figure of sorts, right? You know, even with even in the late 80s, early 90s, you go to Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson was Mike Tyson. You knew he was the baddest man on the planet. You knew that when he stepped in the ring, he was going to beat up his opponent and knock him out, right? So wherever he showed up, he's like, oh snap, that's Mike Tyson. You know what I'm saying? These days, if you see someone like a certain amount of times or whatever it is, then it's like, okay, I've seen them. You know, that's it is what it is. You feel me? You know what I mean? So with that being said, it's like, okay, yeah, he could be undefeated. He could be a multi-division world champion. He could be the undisputed champion, but he doesn't have that aura like those other fighters did back in the day. You know, like a Mike Tyson, like a Muhammad Ali, like a Sugar Ray Leonard, like a Tommy Hearns, like a Roberto Duran. You know what I mean? They don't have that these days. You know, so I think overexposure also plays a part into it. But as far as like how to fix it, I'm not sure at this point. It's multifaceted. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it should be easier, but like, I'm gonna keep it real, bro. Some of these prospect guys be like bigger than what they should be, as far as like bigger headed than what they should be. It's like, bro, you had 3 fights. How do you feel that you're like a megastar already? You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
I say, you should still be like just fighting and fight. You know
yeah,
what I mean? Just taking whatever you
yeah,
can. Like take a little fight
yeah.
down in Georgia.
Right, right, yeah,
Take a little fight down here in Ohio. Take
exactly.
a little fight. Cause like you say, like that word of mouth, and you
Yeah,
never know who's in those venues where they say, "Oh, nah, I've
exactly,
seen him before. I've seen this dude, or he can go." Or guys want to
exactly.
fight on straight top ranked PBC matchroom car. Is like, bro, everybody can't do that, and you're
Yeah,
missing out on
but
opportunities to
even
build.
to that level, right? Here's a prime example. Carmel Moten. His pro debut was after what Canelo versus Charlo, right? So he had that venue there in T-Mobile Arena. But there are other times where you've seen him on PBC cards, but then also you had like opportunities where he was like fighting in Philadelphia, or they tried to have him fight in Philadelphia, but I think he was overweight or something like that. But still like he's still did fight in Philadelphia, but at least that was like off camera or off streaming or anything like that, right? So you could have fights in Mexico, you could have fights in Philadelphia, you could have fights in, as you said, Georgia or Florida or something like that, but at least it's something that's off camera that says, okay, the only opportunity that anyone has to see them fight is if they go to the fight. You know what I mean? So I would rather have more of these fighters that are coming up have those type of fights than to try to put themselves in the opportunity to be seen on television every single fight. Because when you do have that thing where you're seeing every single fight on TV, you also have more people being able to critique you and see the mistakes you may have, coming up in the ranks. And sometimes some of these fighters can't necessarily handle that. You know what I mean? But that's what I had on that front. I pretty much like covered everything that I could here on this particular edition of the Boston Source podcast. Like I said, looking forward to Canelo versus Crawford fight week. So I'll be there in attendance out there starting from Wednesday. As far as like a midweek report, I don't know. I'll try to see if I could go live during the open workouts, and that will probably just count as a midweek report or something like that for Wednesday. All right. So once I get settled in and figure out the logistics and everything like that, then I'll see about going live on Wednesday during the open workouts, and then we'll see what's happening on Thursday with the press conference, Friday with the weigh-in, and then Saturday you have the fight there where y'all be able to watch it on Netflix and everything like that. So that's what I got here for this particular edition of the Boxing Source podcast. Shout out to my guy Topic for being able to join here on this edition. Y'all be sure to follow Topic on social media. What is it? The underscore Topic on social media.
It's just the topic, the TOP1CK, and
Yes.
it's Topic TV on YouTube. TOP1CK TV. Get with me, man.
Yep, for sure. So y'all be sure to check them out there on YouTube and other social media apps and things like that. Of course, you have the Boston Source, whether it's on YouTube, Rumble, Instagram, Facebook, X, all of that type of stuff. You'll be able to follow us here. And with that being said, that is it for me. I'll catch y'all later. Peace out.